Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of our look at M. Night Shyamalan's films, and we've talked about Wide Awake, The Sixth Sense, and Unbreakable. Now we're going to start with Signs, which I know you already did a review for, but I'll just start by saying I thought this was probably the most beautifully shot of all of M. Night Shyamalan's films. Like, the cornfield and outside, it looked really good, you know, especially the opening scene outside. But in the beginning, I didn't find Mel Gibson to be very believable as the former church pastor. You know, he felt like, to me, I thought Mel Gibson's performance was mostly one note, but I felt the kids and Joaquin Phoenix, I thought, gave much better performances, especially Abigail Breslin.
Well, the kids and Joaquin Phoenix, you know, have a big thing going for them. That they were really the comic relief of this movie. I mean, they had some great scenes, you know, particularly Joaquin Phoenix's scene where he's watching the TV and the kids are all in front of it, and vamos. And you know, the thing with Mel Gibson was playing a very tortured character. You know, he was almost like constantly depressed in the movie.
Yeah.
You know, he usually didn't want to be in all the situations he was in. But yeah, it really stuck out to me. It was the first Shyamalan movie I saw in theaters, and it scared the hell out of me. And I remember that very vividly. But you know, bringing up the ending of this movie, I felt was kind of weak with, you know, everything else he had seen. And I love a good alien invasion movie, and this one kept it, you know, very personal with the characters.
Yeah. And
not so much with, you know, sort of global look at it.
No, I think The Village had a weaker ending, but we'll get to that later. And speaking of funny scenes, the scene where Gibson and Joaquin Phoenix think they know who's messing up the cornfields, where they're running around the house shouting, and Phoenix is like, ah! And Milton Gibson's like, yeah, you know, he's not used to doing all this stuff. That was a really wonderful scene, and yeah, this movie kind of scared me. Like, the thought of a possible alien invasion and coming to us really gave me the creeps.
A lot of it comes from the soundtrack. I mean, the soundtrack, you know, there's a lot of strings, a lot of sharp strings in there.
And silence. There's some good silence, especially where Gibson's in the cornfield and he's looking around and he's looking for the person or whatever, or, you know,
whatever's hanging around.
He sees something in the cornfield and he's looking one way down a path, then the other, and there's intensity building up there, and the silence really helped that. But one thing I like about Gibson in this film is when he tries to calm the kids down later in the movie by telling them how they were born. Now, that was a nice touch. I like that a lot.
Yeah, you know, just another thing reinforcing Shyamalan's theme, you know, going back to, you know, the sort of the family structure and family unit. And this movie definitely, you know, had a unique one with, you know, sort of Joaquin Phoenix's brother character in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I liked Signs. I didn't quite like it as much as Wide Awake or Sixth Sense, but I thought it was a tad bit better than Unbreakable.
Unbreakable.
Yeah, but it was alright. Oh, and one more thing I want to mention. I loved how Shyamalan shows how the people in this town don't like change. Like, whenever a stranger comes into town, they're not friendly to him. And when now Mel Gibson plays a pastor who decides not to be a pastor anymore, and everyone keeps calling him father or pastor and all this stuff, and he's like, look, I'm not a pastor anymore, and no one refuses to listen to that. They still treat him like he's the pastor of his former church, and I think it shows that some people still want to keep going on, and when there's a possibility of where people are starting to think aliens are involved, and there's, you know, and that goes from there. You know, I thought that was also a nice touch that a lot of the people don't want to accept any of the changes going on in the town.
Yeah, you know, definitely, you know, like the movie's title, Signs, you know, it's got dual meaning to it.
Yeah.
You know, sort of the signs we see in life, and, you know, the ones they have in the big cornfields.
Yeah. Alright, next film is The Village. Now, this one was probably my first disappointment from Shyamalan. Now, I thought the movie had a great opening montage of life in the village where they don't use words, like you see people cleaning up the house, dishes, there's a dinner at the beginning, but I had an idea of those we don't speak of. I had an idea of what they were, and halfway through the film I changed my mind, saying, okay, that's probably not what I expected, and then later on my original theory was proven correct. So this is probably the only time in a Shyamalan film I'm like, okay, maybe I'm wrong about the twist, and then later I was right the first time.
Yeah, this movie, I got to the ending before the movie did, big time. You know, I was just kind of sitting there. It's like, okay, when are they going to reveal, you know, who they really are, what's really going on?
That's how I felt during Shutter Island. I was just sitting there, or like 30 minutes into the film, like, okay, I know what it is, hurry up. You know, that's how I felt with that. But yeah, now the actors I found to be mixed bag here. Like, some of them seemed to be very unenthused, and they felt like they didn't feel interested in doing this at all. Like, take William Hurt, who plays the elder. To me, he felt like he just didn't want to be there, and there's like one scene where he really puts in an acting effort where he sends his daughter, who's blind, out on a little mission, and he's trying to tell the other elders that this is the right decision. That was probably the only time in the film I felt like he gave a really big effort in this performance here, but everything else was like, okay, now here, remember kids, you do not go out there because of the people we don't think of. I felt like he didn't care.
Honestly, it felt like a Twilight Zone episode that got dragged out to an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, okay, we know what's gonna happen. The other, the ones they don't speak of, the design of them I thought was terrific. I
thought it was over the top.
I thought it definitely it fit. It was very extraneous, and yet it definitely it went with sort of the twist ending. I felt, just not say anymore, but
And speaking of acting, I think the best acting I've seen was from one of William Hurt's daughters when she's expressing her love to Walking Phoenix. I thought that was a good scene. And speaking of the Elder's other daughter, Ivy, who's sent out on the mission, she's played by Bryce Dallas Howard, and she's blind. I did not find her convincing at all. There's times where I felt like she wasn't acting like a blind person, like she knew where she was going and paying attention and all this stuff. And this, another thing, I hate this movie. It's just, to me, was not as suspenseful as the other Shyamalan films.
No, it wasn't really that interesting to me. At the end, it wasn't very memorable. It's not a movie I'm going to go back to and watch again. Okay,
now Lady in the Water is another film you have not seen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, this film I would say is my least favorite of all of Shyamalan's films. I mean, he's trying to do something different here, and I appreciate that, but it's not a thriller, and it's more story-oriented, and it stars Paul Giamatti as a maintenance man in an apartment complex named Cleveland Heap. Now, I thought he gave a very good performance here, and the film had a funny opening, and the photography I felt was different from his other films because it wasn't really moody or all that atmospheric, but at first I was probably more interested in this film than I was in The Village. And then I started caring about the characters and the story at the beginning, and there were some funny scenes here and there. But then after a while, I got bored with the film. The mythology got confusing, it got complicated, and I found the film to be very uneven. And I don't know if it was my TV, but Bryce Dallas Howard plays Story, the nymph, the lady in the water, that shows up, and I had to turn the volume up because I could not understand what she was saying because it sounded like she was talking almost like in a low whisper. It's my least favorite film. I didn't find it engaging, and this is probably my least favorite of his films. So if you're thinking about renting it, Brendan, I would tell you not to bother.
It didn't look too interesting.
Yeah. So it looks like we're out of time again, Brendan. So our next film that we're going to talk about is The Happening, and I'll touch back on The Last Airbender. So, okay, guys, you know what to do. Post your comments on The Signs, The Village, and Lady in the Water, and we will see you with part 3 and the conclusion of our look at M. Night Shyamalan's films. So, take care now.